welcome to our painting of Mama Bear. You can go ahead and set up your workspace. You're going to want to cover your table with some paper. You'll need something to mix colors on. You're going to need a bowl of water and a paper towel for drying brushes. Go ahead and take all the supplies out of your supply bag and take a minute to get your workspace set up. We also recommend wearing a smock or art clothes to protect your clothes. All right, we're going to start in the background of our painting today, which is the sky area, everything above the horizon line. And the first step of this project is to just add a little bit of water to the background. We just want to get this section a little bit damp so it's easier for us to blend our colors here. So I'm using my big brush and I'm just spreading a thin layer of water into the background area. Again, this is the area above the horizon line, or the line that separates the sky from the ground. And I'm just gently going around my little bear silhouettes down here. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just a little bit of water. You can tilt your canvas a little bit to see. Sometimes it's hard to tell what's been wet and what hasn't. If you tilt it a little bit, usually you can get some shine on there and see if there's any areas where you've missed. You can just go back with your brush and just spread the water out into those sections. We're going to be using white for the first step. We're going to be creating a V shape in the sky. So I'm just kind of practicing with my brush before I grab any paint, making sure I'm thinking about what kind of shape I want to make. Then you're going to go ahead and just add some white into that V shape. We want to be able to blend another color. It'll be blue in the next step. And having the white and the water in the background gives us a very fluid area to work in. It's going to help us create a watercolor effect in the sky area of this painting. It's kind of hard to see what you've painted white and what you haven't. Don't worry about it. Just do the best you can. Again, you can kind of tip it a little bit to get some shine on there to see if it helps you see what areas you've painted and which ones you haven't. But it's just painting a white canvas white, so don't worry if you've missed a spot. All right, without washing your brush, we're gonna grab some blue paint. I just added a little bit of water. Just gonna thin it out a little bit. And we're gonna start to incorporate this into that same V shape that we just created. So I'm just using my big brush still, and I'm using horizontal brush strokes, right? So you can see my brush kind of moving left to right, moving back and forth on my canvas. And what I'm trying to do is get my white and my blue to blend together a little bit on the canvas. So you'll see as you watch this section of the video, I'm going back and forth a lot, and this is kind of helping mix those two colors together. And I'm just trying to work within that shape that we created. Don't worry if it goes on the outside a little bit, or if you want to blend it out into towards the edges a little more, that's totally fine. You can also take this blue color and add it to the outside edges of your canvas like I'm doing now. This will give the outside edge of your canvas a nice finished look at the end. As we go step by step with each different color, we'll be adding them onto the remaining edges of the canvas. So this time, you're just gonna add it to where the blue section is. So what we're really doing in these first couple of steps in our background is building some texture and some sort of base colors that we're gonna be able to work on top of in later steps. So what I want to create now is some distant trees. I'm taking my brush and I'm really just dragging it through my wet paint. It's basically just leaving little lines on there. This is gonna maybe look not quite right now, but as we move forward in the other steps, most of this is going to be covered up. So we want to create, like I said, some distant tree shapes, distant ideas of trees. So just trust me, go ahead and drag these tree shapes in there. And in subsequent steps, the majority of this is going to get covered, but you're still going to kind of have that in the background where you're going to create this sense of distance. For the next step, we're going to be using yellow and green. I'm just going to wipe my brush off on my paper towel and add a little bit of water. And then we're mixing about 50% green and 50% yellow. We're going to use this new mixture to fill in the remaining background area of our canvas. So this is going to be all of the area that is remaining above the horizon line. So we are also going to need to fill in some of these littler spaces that are in between our bare legs. When we get up to that step, feel free to swap out to your smaller brush. For now, I'm going to use my big brush to fill in the big area and just carefully work around your silhouettes. If you do get green, this green mixture inside of the bare area or under the horizon line, this is not a big deal. These areas are going to be black. You'll be able to paint right over it. Once again, I am using those horizontal brush strokes to just blend this new color in with our pre-existing white and blue sky color. As I move up from the horizon line towards the top of my canvas, I am adding a bit more yellow just to show that we do have that change in depth. If you're following along with painting of the sides of your canvas, you can go ahead and add the green to the remaining two sides of the canvas all the way down to the horizon line. Continue adding a little bit of yellow towards the top of each of these sections, or a little bit of darker green towards the bottom, just to get the shading the way you like it. And once you are satisfied with this sort of distant background area, you can go ahead and wash that big brush. We're going to be moving on to the bear silhouette area. I'm actually just going to go back in, and before we move on to those silhouettes, I just grabbed some dark green just by itself, and I'm going to be doing a similar distant tree creation process to what we did with our blue area. But this time we're using the green. And if you want to try to create a little bit of a skinnier trunk line there, instead of using the brush with the wide side touching the canvas, I kind of just tilted my brush so that the thinner edge of my brush is what I'm using to create these trunks. If it's easier for you, you can 100% swap out to your smaller brush for this. And listen, there's no right or wrong way to do this. These are trees. They grow all different ways. Go look outside in your backyard. You can see trees are growing every which way. So you can have wiggly trunks. You could have straight trunks. They could split into two. Use your imagination. Just gonna have these in the background. They're not gonna be, that visible once we have our other details in there. So just try to create some general tree shapes in the background. All right, we are getting ready to move on to that bottom section, the black section. So I'm just gonna wash and dry my brush. I'm gonna be swapping between using my large brush and my small brush. So if you've not washed your small brush, you can go ahead and do that as well. I'm gonna fill in the big sections first. This also gives the background, this top area of our canvas, a little time to dry so that we can build some other details on top of there. So, take your time in the silhouette section. I know it's hard sometimes to get these bear shapes just right. And make sure that you're alternating between using your large brush and your small brush when necessary. camera, we're gonna start working in some of this layering that we were talking about. These are gonna be bushes and trees that are closer to the foreground, that are closer to us, not so far away, not distant, in the way that we created the trees in the first couple of steps. So we're actually gonna make two hills, or two sort of areas of bushes. And one is gonna be a little bit farther away, it's gonna be a little bit lighter in color, and one's gonna be a little bit closer, that one's gonna be a little bit darker in color. For both sets of leaves and foliage here, we're gonna be mixing together white, yellow, and green. So for this first one, obviously this one has a bit more white in it and yellow, and I'm just starting to tap in some shapes here. Really just very general, just tapping my brush and just kind of creating this bushy area. Like I said, it's closer to us in the foreground. I have my big brush and I'm just tapping. If you've never tried something like this before, go ahead and try it on a piece of paper before you try it on your canvas. Just make sure that you feel comfortable with the way that it looks. Alternatively, you could try a cotton ball or a cotton swab, a Q-tip, and try to tap it on that way. We try that sometimes when we're creating this project. It's just giving a foliage texture in the foreground. Just grabbing a bit more of that dark green so we can create another layer a little bit closer to the foreground. So this layer is going to go kind of on top of that layer that we just created and closer to the horizon line. This is the same method. We're just tapping this color in and trying to create what looks like foliage, right? Looks like leaves and bushes. If for any reason you tap this foliage onto your bear silhouette, like I do, like I'm going to by accident, you can always just go back at the end and touch up your little bears. So try to get close to them, try not to paint on top of them, but like I said, if it happens, it happens. It's easy to fix. All right, our little foliage sections are looking good. I'm gonna go ahead and wash my brush and dry it, get a nice clean brush. We're gonna start to move towards the trees that are in the closest foreground of our painting. And we're actually gonna be creating the leaves of our tree before we create the trunk. So we're gonna be sort of shaping the tree by using the leaves. It's almost going backwards. Mixing together yellow with just a little bit of white. The reason we want to add a little bit of white to this is that it's going to help the yellow be a little bit more opaque and less transparent. If you tried to put the yellow on there all by itself, you'd probably see the blue and the green through there. All right, we're doing tapping again. Okay, so this is very similar to the technique that we just used to create our foreground foliage down at the bottom. I'm just tapping my brush and trying to create sections of the tree where I feel like, you know, the leaves would be growing. I'm gonna think about kind of where is our trunk gonna go and where do we want the leaves to grow from. Your tree doesn't have to look exactly like this. Every tree in nature is different. Your tree might be bushier, it might have more leaves, it might have less leaves, it might be scrawnier. So don't be afraid to experiment. Once we have all of the leaves on this tree on the left, we're going to add tree leaves to our right side tree. and we're gonna be highlighting with some orange. Perfect, all of our leaves are in. We're gonna swap out to our small brush and we're gonna start to create the trunk of our tree. We kind of want it to grow through where we made our leaves. That's where our branches are gonna go. We're gonna be using brown mixed with just a little bit of black. You can start from the top of your tree, you can start from the bottom of your tree, whatever feels comfortable to you. You're gonna start to just figure out where your trunk is gonna go. Again, trees are not totally straight. If your tree is a little wiggly or it's, not perfect, just accept it. It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be part of your naturescape. As I move towards the bottom of my tree, I'm gonna make my trunk a little bigger. And I'm also going to be adding some branches to support the leaves that we created in the last step. I'm feeling good about my trunks. I'm just gonna go back in with a little bit of white and just highlight one side of the trunk. Just give it a little bit of depth and dimension. I'm gonna do it to both sides. And I'm At this point, if you have any other finishing touches that you'd like to add to your project, now is a good time to do it. If you need to touch up your bears at all, if you got any green on there, this is a good time. You can also add more details in the foreground at this moment. You could add more grass or more leaves, different kinds of trees, different kinds of bushes. So feel free to get creative and really, put your own spin on things. We're going to be adding a little bit of moss down in our silhouette sort of rock area. This moss section is just, again, green and yellow mixed together. We're just sort of highlighting some of the areas in this section where the bears are walking. It's almost like a old mossy tree trunk or a nice, old growth forest. Everybody, you did amazing today. Make sure you sign and date your artwork so you can always remember when you created this beautiful masterpiece. Thanks for painting with us today. Hope to see everybody soon.